Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next speaker on stage. Sajitaran Sinnature, Senior Program Manager at Microsoft and Google Developer Expert on Angular.
Good evening, everyone. You can be a bit more louder, right? Good evening. Are you guys enjoying DevFest? We have thousands of audience, right? So you can be a bit more energetic. Are you enjoying DevFest? That's the spirit. How many of you are front-end developers here? I see only 2 hands. Okay, I see around 50 hands. How many of you are front-end developers? Okay, I see now around 200 hands. So today I'm going to talk about one of the top front-end frameworks, Angular. I will be covering a bunch of new features on Angular, and I will also talk about one of the favorite feature of mine, and that's being recommended by the Angular team to go forward, right? Before that, let me introduce myself in quick seconds. I work at Microsoft as a product manager, and I'm a Google Developer Expert on Angular, and I'm a top contributor on Stack Overflow as well. If you want to talk about anything about development, you can always reach out to me. And those are my social handles. I'm always active on Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow me there as well. And the communities that I run the NG Sri Lanka with a lot of community support here, and even from the GDG team here. And these are the recognitions. With that, let's dive into the demo. I want to start this session with a quick demo showing the capability of Angular with standalone components. So I have hosted this demo online. You can also access using Stack Blitz. So let's everyone stand up and give a round of applause to these organizers here who have put tremendous efforts to get this event going. So the demo is about congratulating and wishing the great success of this team. So I have listed the list of organizers who are driving this event. Probably I have missed some few volunteers and also the rest of the organizers. Sorry for that, but this is a demo that shows the capability of standalone component. You can build features using single component on Angular and do all the capabilities like searching and sorting and things like that. So I just want to congratulate for running this event even during these unprecedented times that we are going through. So congratulations to the organizers. So let's dive into the concept, right? I will go to the code at the end of this session, but before that, I will talk about some of the fundamentals of Angular. So I talked about what is Angular, but if you want to learn as a fresher in this event, Angular is a framework that can be used to develop front-end application. It's not just a framework. It's an ecosystem that gives libraries, tools, component development toolkit that you can use to develop enterprise-level applications. It consists of a lot of integrated tools. You can integrate it with VS Code and build your own libraries, elements, so that you can publish as separate things. And it's an ecosystem for developers, right? The top thing that Angular provides is the community. I mean, if you compare with other frameworks like React, I know there are a lot of React developers out here, React or Vue. The one thing that stands out in Angular is the community. It's completely driven by community. So there are Angular team, and then there are a lot of GDE, Google Developer Experts, who's driving this Angular towards the community. And then we run a lot of events like NG Sri Lanka, and also we have events specific to Angular to embrace the technology to the rest of developers. There have been talks going around like Angular is going down in terms of usage, but this is a survey that has been released last year from the State of JS. I don't know how many of you go through the State of JS survey, but you can see the consistency, right? Starting from 2016, it's around 50%, and then it's going towards 60 right now. This is because Angular team is continuously evolving in terms of features, and they are adding features by talking to developers and getting their feedback. So if you want to contribute to Angular community or Angular itself, I would highly recommend you to go through the Angular repo, and then you can open your feedback by navigating to issues, and then you can work on a feature that you want to add on to the Angular ecosystem. So the whole Angular ecosystem works around complete feedback loop. This is how you can submit a feature request by navigating to github/angular, and then this is the distribution of issues that you can see currently, like in terms of whole framework, in terms of components, and the CLI that developers can use. Before that, let me talk a brief intro about the history of Angular, right? When I started as a developer, I used to work with a framework called AngularJS. This was back in 2008, 2009. This was introduced by Misko Hervey, who used to be a Googler. And then in 2016, Google team invented a new front-end framework that is called as Angular, which completely emits some of these concepts from AngularJS, like scope, ng-app, ng-if. These are completely rewritten and provided as Angular framework, which is 11 times performant than what used to be before. So Angular v4 came in 2017. One of the standalone capability of Angular v4 is that it is more stable and performant. I don't know how many of you used in the past, but HTTP client was introduced in Angular v4, which is mainly to interact with web APIs or the APIs that you build or use to build applications, right? So that is one of the major features released in 2017. And if you look in v8, which introduced this engine called Ivy. So since the introduction of Angular, the rendering engine was completely rewritten using Ivy. That makes better performance for developers in terms of building applications. And then in v10, we introduced this language service and tooling, which can be used to provide localization and internalization to your Angular application. And it came up with a lot of tooling support, like VS Code extension. And then you can talk about component development toolkit, which you can download and do it in your local environment. And with that, back in 2021, the default Ivy was made into place, which means whenever you spin up an Angular application, the rendering engine will be Ivy. And then recently, we announced the Angular version 15, which came up with a lot of features. That's what I'm going to cover in this talk today. So let's talk a little about the features which are very highlighting and useful to developers. I have not listed all the features here, but you can go ahead and see in the Angular blog, like what are the features released. This covers both 14 and v15. The first one is the image optimized directive. I know, like without images, you can't build web applications, right? So this particular feature was added in version 14, which makes like images to be lazy loaded properly so that you don't have to write extra code to load those images, and it renders fast. So it supports with lazy loading with ng-src command. When you put, it will automatically do the optimization and do the lazy loading. And the second one is the strictly type form. I know out of all the frameworks, out of all the front-end frameworks, Angular being the first framework to adopt TypeScript, which is one of the type-safe language that developers tend to use, right? So when you have used forms with Angular before Angular v14, you have to manually write, okay, what is the type for that particular element that you are going to bind, right? That is a bit hard for developers to do that on the front end. This has been automated and made as strictly type forms so that you can, you can use the auto-completion in your TS file, and then you can do the type check. So that is another feature that we have introduced in Angular v14. And the third one is the being a developer. We always go through these issues, right? Back then, when I was a developer back in 2017, I used to start with Angular v4, and we had a lot of issues. Like, there was a time I spent like 3 days to debug an issue on Angular to find out single component was missing, like import was missing on the module. And this can be done automatically within a second by using the diagnostics that is automatically enabled in Angular application. By clicking on that particular error, it will automatically redirect to the component. And there are a few other capabilities that were introduced, like ng completion. So if you're using the CLI, you can use the completion capabilities, which automatically says what could be the next command that you can use. So this is another capability. And then ng cache, which can be used to cache your directives, services in your application, so that you don't have to make those calls again and again. Inject API is one of the other feature that is popular. Like, I know many of you know about dependency injection in any programming languages that you use, right? So dependency injection is one of the important feature in Angular. Like, when you want to use component, when you want to use services which you need to interact with, any of the data that you store in database, you would use services. So you need to inject that services into your component. That is done automatically using the inject API. You don't have to import those services and components into your module. You just need to use the inject API. And the page title strategy. When it comes to SEO, one of the things that you need to understand is the uniqueness of the page that users would navigate to, right? With Angular v14, it was introduced that you can specify each page a title that can be used for SEO and localization. So these are some of the fundamental features that you need to know. And I will come to the last one, which is called standalone components. That is the major feature that was introduced in v15. It was in developer preview in v14, and that was moved to, in public in v15. So I will complete the next 10 minutes by talking about this. So in order to understand about strict typely form, these are some examples, like how it differs from v13 to v14. So you can just go through the examples. And then this is how you introduce the page title strategy, by providing the title in your component. And then inject API would help you to inject those services and dependencies easily by using the inject API. And then extended developer diagnostics. In your Angular JSON file, you can configure those properties what you want to see in your developer console. So if you're a beginner on Angular, these are the 3 fundamental steps that you would do in your typical day-to-day, right? First, you would download the CLI and install the latest version of Angular, and then you would do an ng new app with your app name, which would create an Angular project. And then you would just do ng serve, which will serve your application in localhost 4200. So when you do that, what are the things that scaffolded by default? These are the things that comes up, right? One is component, which users can see. Say if I'm building a products web application, you would see the product. So that is a component. And then the module. Module comprises of different components, and then you need to inject those app component. Like in this case, product component would be a part of the module. And then you have the main TS, which is the file that bootstrap the component. So you can see that bootstrap.app module, which loads the module app, and then inside that you can see the declarations app component, which invokes the component to be rendered on the front end. So if you are a beginner, you can just do an ng new app, and then you would see in 4200 port, you would see a new Angular app saying, hello Angular. So this is fundamental concept in Angular. These are the fundamental things involved, right? So that is called as bare minimum Angular. So you have app module, you have app component, you have routing configured to route those pages to the user's request, and then you have browser module, and then forms module if you are using forms, and finally the main TS file, which is used to bootstrap your application. So if you are completely new to Angular, these are the fundamental concepts that you need to be aware of. I know every one of you here know about Mahela and Sangha. Those are my favorite cricket players, and I hope most of you like them the most, right? So you can remember this Mahela and Sangha are the certified developers. You can take the first word of each of these and understand the fundamental concepts of Angular. So I talked about module and then component, right? Everything in Angular is made up of component. So if you're building a web application, e-commerce web application, products page is a component, users page is a component, profile page is a component. You have to plug and play the component according to your needs. And then let's dive into standalone component, which is one of the features that we introduced, right? Back in 2019, these were the organizers that I could see organizing the, volunteers who were doing this lot of volunteering in the DevFest 2019. So everyone worked on separate areas, and they were working on hospitality registration and making sure that speakers are in place. So Consume DevFest is an Angular app, and then you have these volunteers working on separate areas as component. With standalone component, you would make sure that each component can work independently without using the module. So say if Dilum wants to work on, assume Dilum as a separate component, he can work independently and then provide the capability. So right now he's running the Flutter community, and then Chamod is running the Golang community. So you can work independently, and you can take it as an analogy to understand what the standalone components are. So these components can work independently without injecting into a module. So assume the example that I gave, right? The first example with the ng new app, you would have these declarations defined, app component, admin component, depend on different components. So this has been a hassle with V13, with Angular V13. So this has been completely removed. So probably when you started with Angular 2, you had this list of bunch of things in your app module TS, right? Eventually, we introduced this concept called lazy loading. Lazy loading has been widely used in most of the web applications. With lazy loading, you can render only the particular module that you want to load it to the front end. It improves the performance by a bit, right? But it doesn't completely solve the problem. With standalone component, you can omit all of those. You can lazy load standalone components as well. So these are completely removed, and that's being achieved by standalone components. So what is the purpose of standalone components? It's stepping towards optional ng module now, which means Angular going forward, there is a plan to omit the ng module concept. So you would use the standalone component alone, and then you would build your applications. But it's not going to be deprecated as soon as possible. So it would be there for some time. And then components can be defined without ng module, so you don't have to learn about ng module. So one of the feedback that Google team got from the Angular developers, or from the general front-end developers, is learning Angular, learning curve is a bit high, because you need to understand about ng module, you need to understand about dependency injection. So these feedbacks were accommodated, and that's where they introduced standalone components. So you would spin up a new standalone component using ng generate standalone, and then you can put a tag name standalone, which should spin up a standalone component, which would look like this. So you can see the two tags there. One is standalone true, and then you are also seeing the imports, which is like importing the necessary modules within the component itself. How many of you understood the standalone component concept? Did you understand? Yes or no? Everyone went to sleep? Yes or no? Okay, I can hear some s, which means I will take it as yes. So it's another way to define a component, right? And then the point here is it's very hard to join as a new developer to kickstart with Angular. So that's the point the team has introduced a standalone component. And it is also backward compatible, which means most of the production apps these days are using V4, V8, and V12. So if you want to migrate to standalone component, you can do it stage by stage. You don't have to, completely rewrite the whole app. You can start writing few components, like what are the new features using standalone component, and then migrate them eventually. So it's also backward compatible. And if you are familiar with Angular libraries and elements, standalone components provide much more capabilities and performance in terms of using that. These are non-goals. It's not mandatory to change your entire app to use standalone components. You can do it eventually. And it's not a breaking change, which you need to worry about. So this is a fundamental concept on how you would change your routing. So you just need to do the way that you do earlier, right? So you just need to put standalone and what is the path for that particular component. And then lazy loading can be applied to standalone component as well, which is quick, easy way to configure it in your app. So once you resolve, you would point to the component that is configured in your app. So these are two keywords, how the earlier module got changed to standalone component. These are the two properties being added to the standalone component. So I showed a demo, right? If you had to write the same app, say with V8 or V12, it takes like 250 files for each of the components that you need to write. I mean, you have to write the module, you have to inject those components, and then you have to inject those services. The same thing can be rewritten using standalone component. I will show the code, but these are the different things, right? It also comprises of different factors. One is the performance, and also it improves the loading time for your application, and in terms of file size, it reduces file size. So you have to write less amount of code. So if you are using SCAM means standalone. I mean, if you are using a single component per module, so that is called SCAM. It's very easy to migrate. So if you are using in the past saying that one component for one module, then it's very easy to migrate to standalone component. Otherwise, what you can do is, as I mentioned, you can, write a flag saying that this is a new feature flag. So whatever the new feature that comes in goes into standalone component. What are the existing features would remain the same using the module pattern. So this is the migration strategy. Let me show a quick demo and the code, right? So the demo that I showed earlier. You can also access the demo, but here I'm using StackBlitz. Again, you can go home and have a view about this. So I have two standalone components. One is the organizer card, and then with few controls with some directives. So directives are used to, make the elements with some custom logics. You can see the index.html, which contains only the app component, and this is some library that I have added to add those, flags. And then you can see how a standalone component is here. Like you can see standalone true, and then you will see the selector, and the rest remains the same. In terms of code, I just have the app component and then the other component for the control, which is basically about, the search and sort by capabilities. So this is very simple. I built this application just before this talk, before coming to this place. So you can start doing the same if you want to build your application. So that's how easy it is to, get started. And with that, I want to conclude this talk with the simple my life scenario, right? I came to this DevFest back in 2012 as one of the audience who used to listen to the experts who gave a talk about different topics. But right now, I'm one of the Google Developer expert. If I have to talk about the experience that I got from DevFest, it's made me, the talks that you see make you to inspire from others, which makes you to contribute a lot back to the community. So I would ask you to share whatever you learn with others so that they can, embrace in their career by using the knowledge which you got from you. So make sure that you do that and make use of this opportunity to learn something new. I hope you learned about Angular and standalone component during this talk. And you can take it forward and implement in your application or the company that you work for. With that, these are some of the references that you can use. And I would like to end my talk. Thanks for being a wonderful audience. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks.
Thank you. So I would like to ask Sajidra and Sinatra to be on stage. So I would like to call Rohan Jayavira to come up on stage to give the token of appreciation for Sajidra and Sinatra. Thank you. So guys, it's